hearing today you have been able to watch, so I don't want to ask you to answer a question as you may be occupied with other things, but to the extent to which you have a familiarity, do you feel that there is any enhanced value, better information this afternoon than there was this morning on the issue of the oil spill?
I have not been able to watch any of this hearing. I've been on the floor most of the day trying to cut spending and pay for the spending that we're going to make.
So let's talk about the broader issue that is, while encompassed in what's going on with BP, is just a part of the puzzle, whether we look at banking, whether we look at spending, whether we look at oil, whether we look at special interests, whether we look at the process of the government. There is no shortage of evidence that the systems are non-functional or that the risk and liability in what is being created by our politicians is massive, although postponed into the future. Am I wrong, Senator Coburn, to perceive our government as being in a perpetual state of denial as opposed to actually coming to terms with some of their own shortcomings and being honest with our country about its own people's shortcomings and what they have demanded and requested? And is there a way around that? Can we break this denial block, and am I wrong to perceive it?
Well, Dylan, I think you put that very well. The problem is in Washington, we have a lot of short-term thinkers, and it's a consequence of our political system. We are now at the point that we no longer have the option of thinking about politicians. We've got to be thinking about the future of the country. And you know, we're running $1.6 trillion deficit this year. And I'm not putting blame on anybody. The fact is we can't keep doing what we're doing. We have to start making the government more efficient. We have to start eliminating low priority programs. We have to start making the hard choices that nobody wants to make, but it must be made when we're going to double our debt in 5 years and triple it in 10. And we've got this overexposure to where we're going to be like Greece in a couple of years if we don't do it.
No one disagrees with your evaluation, certainly on process. There's plenty of debate as to either how to reform the process or where to go after the spending. Why do you think, and maybe I just haven't seen it, have we seen a meaningful reform proposal on process to either try to enhance the transparency of who's getting money from who and why, who's getting earmarked for what, where, who's doing what when it comes to the issue of conflict of interest? And if we're not getting that, what can be done by everybody else in America to pressure people like you to put more legislation forward that improves the process to reduce the conflict of interest that's giving us all these other terrible outcomes?
Well, a couple of things. And number one, we got a bill sponsored by 23 Democrats and Republicans for an earmark database transparency so American people can see what we're asking for. You can combine that with the FECs and you can see the conflict of interest. Number two is to actually make common sense. You know, you've covered the financial world for years. Nobody sits with $1.6 trillion in the bank and borrows money when they've got that and they know they're not going to spend it over the next 2 years, except that's exactly what we're doing on the bill that's on the floor today. And yet they're going to reject unobligated balances, which are $690 billion, Dylan. $690 billion that's unobligated that isn't going to be spent in the next year, and yet they won't allow us to take $50 billion of that to help pay for unemployment insurance, to help pay for a doctor fix. They just rather charge it to our children. So and this isn't really partisan. It's short-term thinker versus long. It's the lack of a realization of what reality really is. The fact is the bond vigilantes eventually are going to go after us.
Yep. If you were to look at this as a leadership issue, because the truth of the matter is, to solve these problems, we need meaningful reform in the financial markets. We're obviously not seeing that with the current debate today. Today they eliminated shareholders' rights with this maneuver by Chris Dodd to make it so only one shareholder can actually, for one shareholder to affect a company, they have to own 5% of a company's stock, as opposed to a group of shareholders owning 3% of that stock. The White House is implicated in that by the Huffington Post reporter Ryan Grimm today. There are so many examples of this. At what point will the American people become intolerant of the denial culture and the culture of placation and lies effectively, or postponements from its politicians, where there's got to be a point where, at least in my opinion, you're more likely to lose your job as a senator for your failure to address the long-term interests of this country than not. It's just a matter of when we hit that tipping point. Do you think we're anywhere near there?
Well, listen, I sure hope so. I'd like to have some help. I've got 5 grandkids. Right now, each of them owe $42,000 on the debt. In 4 more years, they're going to owe $98,000. In another 4 years after that, they're each going to owe $180,000 before they've done anything in their life. And that applies to every man, woman, and child in this country. That's the kind of debt. We're gonna break the cycle of prosperity in this country, and we're gonna give a lower standard of living to everybody that follows us.
Yeah.
And that's all on the fact that we have this bad habit of not being able to make hard choices, because we always want to put the credit card in the machine and charge it to our kids and grandkids and kick the can down the road.
Yeah,
it's time for hard choice. Even if I get beat, Dylan, if I make the right choices that are best for this country in the long term, it's worth getting beat for if we save the country.
I couldn't agree more. Again, I'll leave it because I want to get back to this hearing. But before I let you go, Senator, could you just tell us the name and title on that earmark bill so that those of us who want to can learn a bit more about it?
It's called the Earmark Transparency Database Bill. It's going to be marked up this next week in the Homeland Security. We have 23 co-sponsors. I think it's 10 Democrats and 13 Republicans. So it's a bipartisan bill. We know that needs to be out there. The people need to call in and say, we want you on it. We want this stuff transparent so you can see it.
All right, listen, Senator, thank you for the information, the education, and the time. We'll talk to you sooner rather than later. Let's go back into this hearing. You can see, obviously, Congressman Stupak posing a question here.
The blowout preventer is designed to be the ultimate fail-safe. That is its design basis. It's the basis on which the industry has operated for 30 years.